Hello again, welcome back to the Unloved JDM channel. So, if you heard this on the radio and if you saw this on any of our socials a few days ago, on May the 1st, we are hosting a family fun day at the NY500 Cafe in Pickering, our usual location as you know. There will be a lot more information to come on that before we obviously get to it. But if you do want to know, keep an eye on our Facebook and Instagram and I'll put that up on there. In today's video, I had to get that out there before I forgot. In today's video, we're going to look at my Subaru. So, there's nothing wrong with it, hopefully. This is one of those things that, if you don't know what you're looking for, it's kind of a nightmare and it's a little bit scary. So, if you have your MOT coming up, which obviously is a UK thing, but obviously all cars have to be roadworthy and inspected in some sort of sense. If you've got your MOT coming up, I'll give you a few things to look for. If your car's been sat over winter, like mine has, I'll give you a kind of a list of what I checked over when this came back out, because it wasn't tucked away, it wasn't off the road, it was on the road at home, but I didn't use it throughout the winter. So obviously one of the things that happens is you end up with a flat battery. So before I talk too much, let's dive into it and see what we find. Right, so one of the first places I always start with anything, because it's easiest, is straight under the bonnet, and obviously not everybody's got access to a ramp to get underneath it without a lot of effort. First things you want to start checking when you get under here, let me grab a torch, is you want to check over all the simple things like belts and hoses and stuff like that. If we compare, if you bring the camera in, I'll show you these two. So these two there, we've got one belt that's quite new, little bit slacking it, but nothing too much, and then versus that belt that's quite old. Obviously I did this because I built a full car, but one belt is only like power steering and alternator, which is the important one, which is the one that's new, ironically, and the other one's only air conditioning, which I don't use on this car anyway at the moment, so not too worried about that because it's still March and it's still freezing. Other than that, next thing you want to move on to is have a look over all of your hoses. Make sure, I don't have one to show you, make sure there's no splits or cracks or anything like that that might pop under pressure, especially if you're just bringing the car back out and it hasn't seen the action for a little while. That doesn't just mean such as coolant hoses and stuff like that. That means any kind of hose that's in the bay, vacuum hoses, all of it, it will cause you an issue sooner or later. So make sure you check over all of those. Obviously, under the bonnet, you've got your usual checkpoints. So we've got coolant, which it's got liquid in there. There's a little bit of rust sat around the cap because, as I say, it's been sat. But coolant is quite a funny thing. It is worth, in my opinion, it's worth changing. In the sense of, it's worth dropping it all out of the system, refreshing it all, topping the coolant up with like actual coolant, not just water, and redoing it and starting again. When you do that though, make sure that you do bleed it and get all the air out, because if not, it'll feel like it's going to overheat. And make sure the thermostat operates as well. Thermostats are quite easy to check. If you wanted to, you could take it out and go as far as to put it in some boiling water. If it moves and sort of opens under boiling water, it's fine. But as I say, you'll soon find that out and you start driving it anyway. Next thing is, obviously, biggest on the bonnet department will be the oil. Now I'm hoping this has got enough in it, but it's always worth checking. So there's two things you're looking at with your oil. As I say, if your car's been sat a little while, it's worth looking into a little bit. So on this particular car, we have, get a little bit light on that there. So we've got a point there and a point there, and oil needs to be in that sort of range. And the colour of the oil also should tell you a story as well. You don't want it to be real old and dark, obviously. Cars should be serviced every so many miles or at least once a year. And this will actually be done pretty soon, because this was essentially last year's oil. You also got things like screen wash check, which is obviously MOT failures if they're empty. That probably will need topping up as well on this car, so that's all we're worth knowing. And if, like me, because this was sat for so long, and obviously you've got your alarm system in it and it's flashing, I started it up a couple of times during winter, but ultimately it was just sat. The battery was flat as well, so that took a little bit of reigniting. It is best to have them on a trickle charger if you can, just to keep it alive and stable. But I actually jump started it a couple of times and then ran it, and it actually did charge back up perfectly fine. So up to now anyway, and that was a few weeks ago. Alright, so move the car up into the air. You can, as I said before, you don't need a ramp to do all this, but it's worth having one, obviously, if you've got the opportunity. As far as MOT checks go, one of the things that look for with wheels off the ground is brakes. So as I say, if your car's been sat for the winter, it is worth stripping down the brakes to clean them up. Or if you're not like certain about how to do it, let a garage do it, because brakes are the last thing you want to be playing with if you're not sure. But other than that, you want to be obviously checking your tyre pressures before you drive it. Make sure your brakes are not seized but will work, obviously, if you try and drive it. Because obviously MOTs last for a year, so if you were to pull your car out of storage, let's say last March, and then you've had it sat since October to February, March time again, you would technically still be MOT'd as this one is, but it is coming up for retest, so it has been sat a while. Just be aware of things like that. As I said, moving on to wheels and tyres. Tyres, make sure you've got no major cracks or anything like that. These are not that old. I do remember putting them on. They've got loads of tread on and stuff like that. And then the next thing you want to do is grab hold of your wheel. Make sure you can't rattle it like that. No loose play. And that will check primarily your track rod end, which I think is on the front of this car. It's generally opposite the caliper. Make sure it doesn't bind up too much. And same again, bottom ball joint. No issues there at all. And then it is worth, if you bring the camera in, I'll show you in here. So this one has all been under seals and stuff like that a little while ago. It's worth just checking the springs, because sometimes springs will snap when it's sat. Like that one there's got a little bit of corrosion on it where it's been sat against, obviously, the shock absorber. But ultimately, the spring itself should be fine. Famous last words. Similar kind of thing on the bike. Just go look over it. Make sure there's no loose play in it or anything like that. Obviously, make sure your handbrake's off. Same thing with the spring on this car, or some cars are tucked away underneath. And just make sure, once again, that it's free enough. You have to bear in mind that obviously, like this particular car is four-wheel drive. So when you try and turn it, there will be some resistance. But for example, the rear discs on this, these are coming to the end of the life. So they've got like really horrible kind of lines in there. This is all corroded. But this car is getting upgraded rear brakes soon anyway, because they don't match the Brembos that I put on the front a little while ago. After that, obviously same on all four corners. Check all four tyres, check all four brakes, all suspension. Have a look over it. If anything looks wrong, you can just sort of get alarm bell straight away. I don't obviously have anything to show you on this car, hopefully. But next thing's next, we'll move underneath the car and we'll see what we can find under there. Right, so moving underneath. Obvious things to check is an issue that I do have on this car, which is an oil leak. As I say, if you've been sat over the winter, you may have an oil leak, but you may not know about it yet. But it is something that if it's severe, it can fail an MOT for. Once again, checking round there. These CV boots, these quite often split when they're sat because they're just rubber, and as they rotate, they change shape and angle and stuff. So that's worth knowing about. Bushes, like on the drop links and things like that, these perish, these not, these rattle. And when I said to you wobble your wheels before, that was to check things like the joint on there and the bottom ball joint on there. And once again, that and that both have rubber boots on, both of which can be issues. Looking up a little bit, now this car's got upgraded lines on it, so it's not too bad, but those, if I can get my hand to it, those there are your brake lines. If they obviously look like they've been there for far too long, if the ends are all corroded and stuff, they are worth changing for definite, because they're not expensive and they're quite easy to do if you're alright doing them. So, same thing underneath, just look for general issues and signs of corrosion. This car has been welded a few times, if I'm honest, and probably will need a few more at some point in life, but hopefully not yet, because it's in for its MOT in a couple of days. But once again, just checking over everything, and we'll move around the back. So similar sort of story around the back. Check for obvious corrosion, signs of leakage, split pipes, perished bushes or anything like that. Obviously the rear end's been on it a little bit longer, so I'm just checking over everything just for the same reason. A little bit of a seep on the diff maybe, but again, this will be changed before it season goes out properly, let's say, for all the same reasons. But overall, under there's nothing bad that I can show you, thankfully, so that should be fine. Obviously, then once again, one thing it is worth doing before you drive it at all is check all your lights over, just make sure everything works, because obviously that's a massive safety issue, and it could be a really easy fix before failing an MOT. Obviously, the things you can't check are emission stuff, and is like brake efficiency and stuff like that. Alright, so one thing that James has just brought up is quite a good idea. If you're going to park yours up, obviously at this time of year it's not really an issue, but if you're going to park it up before the winter, and I've seen this actually asked on a bunch of like owners forums and stuff like that for various cars, one thing that's worth doing is try and park it with the handbrake off, whether that means chocking the wheels, whether that means you know, leave it in gear or whatever just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Do that, and then, as I said before, battery charger is a good idea to trickle charge, or at least take it off if you've got it locked up somewhere, like in a garage or whatever. That's definitely worth doing. All right, so I think I've covered all the important stuff. If I haven't, I apologise. It's all I could think of at the time of filming this. So there we go. I'll send this back down and we'll have a little bit of a look. So in the background of the video at the moment, you might have noticed a little bit of progress on the skyline, depending which kind of way the camera's been pointing. There is going to be a video comes out on this soon because there's been so much going on with it. But in the video that's coming out, it will go as far as, fingers crossed, because it doesn't actually do it yet. It will go as far as it running, so it might be quite a lengthy video. But if you want to see that, make sure you have subscribed, because then you will actually get to see it. But in the meantime, let's fire this old girl up and see how she runs. Fire the hole! Righto, so that's where I'm going to leave this one. I hope this helped at least somebody a little bit, and if it does, please like and comment. And if you want to stick around and see the rest of the stuff that we're going on this year, make sure you are subscribed as well to see the other cars hopefully get done with a little bit of luck and a little bit more free time. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.